ago.
When I was younger, I loved writing stories about characters from different worlds who would meet up with each other and go on adventures. One such story revolved around a group of entertainment icons who would take on threats new and familiar. And this story was called Super Smash Bros. Before being renamed to Media All-Stars. Some of you may have seen that video I uploaded called Media All-Stars Part 5. That was part of a reboot I was working on for this series, though it was largely made out of boredom if I remember correctly. The only thing that is shared between the two universes is that it's set in a world where many iconic characters live with each other, and our main group of characters includes Mario, Sonic, Rayman, SpongeBob, and Zim. The reboot was pretty much a fresh attempt at the series, and was coincidentally being worked on 5 years after the original was finished. Yeah, back in 2014, I made an entire film about my fanfiction, and it was created with the previous version of Filmora, Wondershare Video Editor, which you can tell because there's an annoying watermark over the whole film. That's what I get for using the free version. Actually, I remember showing this movie to my family, and the whole time they were complaining about the watermark, and I can't blame them. Ugh, and I feel so sorry for subjecting them to this movie. Regardless, the film itself was mainly a slideshow with video footage sprinkled in to explain certain plot points and events. Kind of like the reboot, but instead of having the characters move around, they take up the whole screen as they talk. And the speech bubbles they use to communicate come at such a slow rate that it makes the movie boring. Captain, how did the Great Chicken War start? It all started a long time ago. The worlds were separated, but then a man named Vexar, he along with 2 other villains, came as threats to the worlds, so the worlds were merged by Master Hand and Crazy Hand. But that didn't stop Vexar. He had control over... Okay, I think you've seen enough. Now, I can't upload the full movie to my channel because of copyright reasons, though I wouldn't necessarily want to upload it anyway, but seeing as it's been 10 years since I made it, I thought it would be fun to revisit and reflect on this older film I made. Get ready to cringe! So, what is Media All-Stars about? Well, the short answer is that it's a bloated movie with tons of unnecessary pop culture references and scenes or character appearances that add nothing to the plot, and a story that is too depressing and complicated for what is supposed to be a family film. Now for the long answer. Media All-Stars takes place in a world of self-aware fictional characters, who all live amongst one another in peace. That is, until a man by the name of Vexar hatches a plot to destroy the world out of hatred and restart it for himself. Joining Vexar is Spat from the Hamtaro series and Cyclotron X from Math Blaster, who is represented by a personality core from Portal in the movie. Similarly, Vexar is represented by a Sniper Joe enemy from Mega Man, but he's from a game called... Actually, I'm gonna hold off on telling you which game he's from. Believe me, you're not ready for his story in the film. Anyways, while Vexar is scheming, we cut to Mario's house where Mario and Luigi are reading the paper with Rob, whose connection to the Mario Bros is never established in the film, and an alien named Zezu. Who is Zezu, you might ask? Well, he's a character from an edutainment game where you try to help this cute little alien guy build a rocket to go back home. It's kinda like E.T., but the government doesn't get involved, and the kids can build a fully functioning spaceship in an afternoon. Why is he with Mario and Luigi? Well, it's not explained until the end of the movie, but basically, Zezu crash-landed in front of the Mario Bros. House, and they took him in as a friend. But all you need to know for now is that Zezu is the delightful comic relief character, who's not going to be involved in any potential tonal whiplash whatsoever. None at all. Back on topic, they're reading the paper and find out that a museum has opened up recently, so they decide to check it out. While there, they read about a tomb belonging to a fallen war hero named Captain Homer, who was supposedly the only person to die in said war, and his corpse is put for all to see within the museum, which is weird, I know, but I was also obsessed with Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid, and if you've seen the movie, then you know that there's a part where they see an exhibit with a mummy still in its tomb. So that's what this scene is based on, but still, it's weird. The corpse in our story says to bring Weevil Weed to him, which not only does Rob happen to have on him for some reason, but it also brings this corpse back to life. Said weed is based on the Jeeves Weevil from that episode of Courage. You know how it sucks the life out of people? Well, this Captain Homer fella came up with a way to reverse engineer the weeds, so that it gives life instead of taking it away. But I don't think I ever explained that in the movie. Huh. Just as our resurrected captain is getting his bearings, Vexar appears and attacks our heroes, but they manage to get away from him and run into a nearby forest. It's here where Captain Homer finds the Tree of Life, which changes its location every once in a while or something, and after performing Totaka's song in front of it, they find the Fountain of Youth inside. Are you with me so far? You better be, because this scene is important, even though it doesn't come up again until the third act. Anyway, everyone takes some water from the Fountain of Youth except for Zazu, and Captain Homer puts some more water in bottles that he just happens to have, and they set out to find more heroes to stop Vexar. Speaking of which, Vexar retreats to his base, the Dark Matter Comet. No, not the one from the Scooby-Doo and Courage crossover. That film didn't exist yet. It was pretty good, by the way. And that's twice I've referenced Courage in this video, huh? Anyway, Vexar's plan to eliminate Captain Homer might have failed, but he can still put his main one into effect. We find out that he has made a deal with Majora, the evil spirit from Majora's Mask, and unleashes the spirit into the moon, setting it on a crash course to the planet. Just like in the game Majora's Mask. And what does Vexar get out of this, besides satisfaction that the world will be destroyed? We'll talk about that later. From here, our heroes go to different locations to recruit different characters, and for the sake of saving time, I'm gonna go through the next scenes as quickly as I can. In the next scene, we're introduced to Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and our heroes meet up with them only for Dementors from Harry Potter to show up. Also, they can talk for some reason. The song playing during this scene is the Gremlins theme. Anyway, Captain Homer does a thing, and all the Dementors die. In the next scene, our heroes travel through a Minecraft cave and make their way into the Glade of Dreams to find Rayman. At that moment, the giant rabbit from Raving Rabbits is causing chaos, only for Rayman to put a stop to him. He and Glowbox, who is now in the movie, travel with our heroes to Bikini Bottom. There's a joke about Sonic not wanting to go under the sea because he can't swim, but Captain Homer just pushes him into the sea anyway. And there's no reason given for how they can breathe underwater. Also, as Vexar and his cohorts are watching the heroes, there's a joke where Spat and Cyclotron X start singing Under the Sea, only for Vexar to interrupt them and say that it's the wrong franchise. Anyway, our heroes meet SpongeBob and Patrick at Jellyfish Fields, where suddenly Dennis from the movie shows up after being called there by Plankton, who was called by Vexar moments before. SpongeBob and Dennis race to the Krusty Krab, and as our heroes run to keep up with the race, Glowbox trips over himself and barrel rolls right into Dennis, sending him flying, leaving SpongeBob and Patrick as the winners of the race. In the scene after, our heroes re-emerge to recruit Wario and Waluigi for some reason, who are singing Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap by AC/DC, a moment which lasts a good minute and a half for no reason, and Captain Homer recruits them by saying that gold is involved, even though our heroes never come across gold during the whole adventure. Then our heroes sneak into Invader Zim's base to recruit him and Gur, and also Dib, who's there for some reason, and Captain Homer convinces Zim to join them because if the world is destroyed, then Zim will have no world to take over. We then cut to a montage with Smash Mouth's All-Star playing in the background, where other pop culture characters are recruited to this group. These characters will have little to no impact on the story afterwards, so there's no point in having them in the movie. After a while, the heroes go to a dump to build a flying base of operations, only to be attacked by a whole bunch of villains. They take them down, and Bowser is recruited to the heroes in the process because Captain Homer said so. Also, Mewtwo joins the group at this point for some reason too. And that is the end of Act 1. It's just one scene after another of characters being introduced, many of which don't have any point in the story and are only there to be like, hey, I'm in this movie too. The only other thing worth mentioning is what Vexar is up to during this time. But again, I want to save that for later. In the next scene, our heroes have made a flying ship out of Zim's base and some junk from the dump. Was there a pirate ship in the dump or something? I don't know. As they take off, it's here where we get a bit more backstory about Captain Homer and the war in which he died. Essentially, the worlds of each character used to be separated, like each franchise had its own planet or something. But when Vexar showed up and managed to convince every villain to join him, Master Hand and Crazy Hand brought the worlds together for some reason, making one giant planet. Vexar waged a war against the world, and Homer was a soldier in the war. He's also kind of a weapon and armor designer, but that's not important for now. Homer was killed by Gruntilda from the Banjo-Kazooie series, who was posing as a fellow warrior, but not before Homer could get a shot at Vexar's face, shooting out his right eye. Did I forget to mention that this movie is unnecessarily violent in some parts? Because it is. And after that whole thing with Vexar's eye, I guess he just called off the whole war and went into hiding for 10 years? Anyway, the heroes arrive at a cabin up in the mountains where an old friend of Homer's, Jack, lives. I should mention that Homer and Jack are original characters for this movie and have unique designs that I didn't bother making for the film. This is what they're supposed to look like, but for this movie, I used a villager from Animal Crossing for Homer and a random Sharp Claw enemy from Star Fox for Jack. Why a Sharp Claw? I have no idea. While at this cabin, our heroes are briefed on their mission: stop the moon from falling on the world, and it just so happens to be heading for Termina. Yes, this second act is Majora's Mask 2 Electric Boogaloo. But apparently, the giants that stopped the moon in the game have retired and their kids aren't ready for the responsibility of stopping the moon, so instead they have to activate these towers that happen to be in Termina's dungeons. And as we find out later, they can only be activated by a being from Planet Z, which Dudw happens to be. So our heroes take off to Termina, only for Jack to be ambushed by Vexar and his henchmen in his own house. Vexar stabs Jack for interfering and has the henchmen, called Dark Matter Demons, search for something in Jack's house. The thing in question is nowhere to be found, so they leave. Our heroes arrive in Termina, only for their ship to immediately crash into the fields due to paranormal interference. Don't you just love it when the super cool ship you spent time building suddenly crashes? Seriously, it was introduced less than 10 minutes ago and it already crashed. Well, the heroes begin to search for the towers in each region of Termina, and Dudw activates them by putting his hand up to them or something. Regardless, after quickly activating the towers in the swamp and mountain regions, there's trouble in Clocktown. See, Vexar realized that the thing he's looking for is at a shop there, because Jack seemingly traded it there or something. The doors to the store is locked, so Mario and Zim use the back entrance, with Zim using his spider legs to tear off the door. Why he couldn't have done that at the front and how Mario knew about this back door is unknown. Regardless, the heroes get into the store to see Vexar obtaining an orb, and Patrick confuses Vexar for the Green Goblin from Spider-Man. I'll explain this later. After a minute of everyone standing around dumbfounded, Vexar teleports away with the orb, but not before blowing up the store. Muto, a minor character from Majora's Mask, who refuses to believe that the moon is a threat, blames the All-Stars for blowing up the store, but Captain Homer convinces the mayor that they didn't do it, and that results in Muto getting banished from the town. Back on the Dark Matter Comet, Vexar examines the orb in more detail and throws it at the wall in frustration, as it's a fake. Frustrated, Vexar starts to think about where else the orb could be, but one of his henchmen shows him a familiar-looking mask they found at the store. This gives Vexar an idea of where it is, and he sends Cyclotron X to retrieve the orb from this location. The heroes continue on their quest and head to Great Bay, where they summon the giant turtle from Majora's Mask to give them a ride to the region's dungeon. While on the way there, the turtle leaves the heroes at a shipwreck near the dungeon because it got scared by the sinister spirits or something. Said shipwreck is home to a crew of skeleton pirates led by Spinal from Killer Instinct, who tells the heroes to leave. Mario attacks one of the crew members, which leads to them having an all-out brawl, and Luigi ends up defeating Spinal, which causes the skeletons to retreat. Besides Luigi having a cool hero moment, this isn't an important part of the movie, but it's not the most inconsequential scene. We'll get to that later. Anyway, they get to the dungeon, find the tower, and find a secret tunnel that'll take them back to the mainland. How convenient. Meanwhile, it turns out that the orb is in the possession of Jean Descalais from the Professor Layton series, who happens to be living in Termina for some reason. Cyclotron X confronts Descalais about the orb, which leads to the two having a brawl for it. Descalais uses one of his machines, and Cyclotron X turns into a giant mech. Eventually, Cyclotron wins, and threatens to kill Descalais' butler in exchange for the orb. Descalais hands the orb over, and Cyclotron disappears as the heroes arrive on the scene. Descalais and Jack had a trade at the shop in Clocktown for the orb, as Descalais wanted to do research on it or something. And I guess he accidentally left one of his masks in the store, which is how the henchmen found it. Regardless, Mario turns into Dr. Mario to heal the scientist and his butler, and the heroes continue. Back on the comet, Cyclotron gives Vexar the orb, and he sends Spat to prevent the heroes from awakening the last tower. This gives Spat the idea to manipulate Muto, who's out in the fields of Termina. Spat uses his trident to turn Muto into a monster, because that's something he's always been able to do. It's on the Hamtaro Wiki, I promise, and he sends him after our heroes. They are stopped by a random old man who wants to have a Pokemon fight. Pikachu and Lucario of the group fight his Chestnut, while Mewtwo watches from afar. They win, and that's it. There's nothing of substance to the scene, no plot development, no character growth, just a random Pokemon battle. Remember when I said there was a scene more inconsequential than the spinal scene? Yeah, this was it. Anyway, now we're at the last tower where Muto and Spat are blocking their way. Luckily, Jack is here to help out. Oh, yeah, he healed himself earlier or something. Regardless, he gives Mario the Fire Bar item from Smash Bros, and the heroes attempt to fight back against Muto. During the battle, Spat drops his trident, which gives Homer the idea to grab it and leap inside of Muto to undo the spell on him, while also apologizing to him for getting him banished. The spell is lifted, Muto and the heroes are on good terms, and Spat runs away. Why I decided to give so much screen time and development to a random Zelda NPC, I don't remember. Anyway, the final tower gets activated, and not a moment too soon as the moon is getting close to landing on Termina. The towers are only slowing the moon down though, so the heroes run back to Clock Town to see what they can do. That's when Zayzu decides to enter the moon itself to stop it. Here, he finds Majora's spirit, who challenges the little alien to a fight, but not before Mario and the others interrupt. Mario scolds Zayzu for being too reckless, and Zayzu says that he'll be more careful in the future. He won't. Majora fights the heroes and loses, but tries one last-ditch attempt to kill them all. Every hero is blown out of the moon except for Zayzu, who stays behind to deliver the finishing blow, destroying Majora and sending the moon back to its rightful place, which frustrates Vexar. On a side note, there was a subplot about Vexar making a mask for Majora that he would use for a new body, but the only reason I came up with it was for a cool shot where the mask bursts into flames right here. So there wasn't really a reason for it. Back to the heroes, something from the sky crash lands outside of Clock Town, which happens to be Zayzu, who's on the verge of death. After saying his goodbyes to Mario, he dies. Let me rephrase this. The comic relief character, who comes from a delightful little edutainment game, is dead after trying to prove his worth to the heroes. There's no build-up for him wanting to prove his worth, no reason why he should be doubting his self-worth, especially since he's the reason why they can activate the towers. It just comes out of nowhere that he dies. Like, it does help with the moral of the story, which we'll get to later, but there wasn't a real reason or build-up for Zayzu's death, other than having a forced emotional moment. Anyway, at this point, Mario, Sonic, and Rayman get abducted by the Dark Matter Comet, so the other heroes rush to the ship, which is fixed now, to chase after them. On the comet, Vexar shoots Mario down, but instead of dying, Mario turns into a trophy like Subspace Emissary. Now, remember the scene from earlier with the Fountain of Youth? Well, this is why that scene is in the movie, to explain how the heroes can come back after getting killed or beaten. Even though Sonic acknowledges that it's like Subspace, which assumes that the heroes would be able to do this anyway, so what's the deal? Also, Zayzu didn't drink from the fountain, which is why he didn't turn into a trophy. Anyway, once Mario has been resurrected, the three heroes are chased down by Vexar's minions, but they eventually regroup with the rest of the All-Stars, who arrive just in the nick of time. Without any enemies nearby, the heroes take a look around, and they notice the Mudokons from Oddworld working on the comet. They decide to take this opportunity to rescue them, and there's a comment from Zim about how Mudokons once helped the Urkin Empire, which, given what the Urkin Empire does in Invader Zim, sounds very unlikely. After rescuing many of the Mudokons, Vexar locates our heroes. During this confrontation, someone else wanders onto the scene and... well, let's get a bit into who Vexar is and where he's from, shall we? In Media All-Stars, Vexar is loosely, and I mean loosely, based on a character of the same name from a series called Starflyers. It was a series of edutainment games revolving around a girl who pretends that she, her friend, and her toys are intergalactic heroes. Vexar is the main antagonist of those games, though he's a school bully whom this girl pretends is a space villain. I played one of the games when I was younger, and I remember it being a charming adventure game, though Vexar himself wasn't in it too much. But I thought his design was kinda cool, and it kinda resembled Sniper Joe, which is why I used that as his stand-in for the movie. It also looks like Green Goblin's design from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, which is why Patrick had that comment from earlier. Regardless, the game that Vexar came from was a completely harmless adventure game that was perfect for younger audiences. So, I looked at Vexar and said, Oh, I'm gonna give you a messed up backstory and turn you into a bloodthirsty villain, pal! Which I assume is the same thought that goes through every talentless director who decides to turn a beloved public domain character into an unoriginal horror movie. And while we're here, and if you would allow me to skip ahead a bit, let's go over Vexar's backstory, and believe me, you're not ready for this. Vexar grew up as a homeless orphan with his unnamed siblings. His sister was kind to all and had a deep love for the animals of the forest. But the nearby town was having a food shortage, and so the newly appointed mayor had a great idea. Massacre the animals in the forest for food! Understandably, Vexar's sister wasn't going to have this and did everything she could to stop the mayor's plan. And in return, the mayor saw this child protesting and was like, "Execute her." I would like to stress that I care about the children and hate any acts of violence towards them, fictional or otherwise. Anyway, Vexar's sister dies, which this town is okay with, and Vexar's older brother eats a chili dog during the execution. Later on, the two brothers open a blacksmith shop where Vexar does all the work, while his brother sleeps all day but gets credit for everything. Vexar finally snaps, murders his brother, sets the entire town on fire, and ties the mayor to a pole to witness the burning town. You know, I gave this movie a PG rating when I first made it, but it should be PG-13. Regardless, Vexar takes to the skies, recruits Cyclotron X and Spat, takes over the Dark Matter Comet, and decides to wage war on the entire universe because some of the mayor's supporters came from other worlds or something. During the movie, Vexar makes a deal with Majora to resurrect his sister in exchange for destroying the world. We would occasionally cut back to Vexar and his sister during the movie to see what they're up to, which isn't much. Also, how a girl who is against violence towards animals is okay with Mudakan slaves in her brother's fortress is never addressed. Back to the present moment, Vexar's unnamed sister would have happened upon the heroes and villains squaring off. Captain Homer sees this girl, and deduces that Vexar must be in pain or something, and decides that they should help Vexar with moving on. Wow! What a kind and heroic thought to reason with the enemy instead of fighting them! Where do we start, Captain Homer? Why, by killing Vexar's sister for literally no reason, of course! Man, I made a stupid movie. Naturally, Vexar is ticked and sends his entire army after the heroes, but not before Captain Homer convinces the All-Stars to reason with Vexar, and Mario, who's currently going through a major loss, agrees with this sentiment. The heroes and villains have an all-out battle, and Mario runs after Vexar. Mario pulls out his firebar to defend himself against Vexar, but it's immediately destroyed. So much for having a cool weapon when you barely get to use it. This is where Vexar would give his whole depressing backstory, and we would find out more about his plan. Once Majora destroys the world, Vexar would have used the Dark Matter Comet to reform the world into what he wants it to be. A paradise for nobody else but him and his sister. Vexar and Cyclotron X would be rewarded too, especially since the three villain grew close as friends, and the Mudokons would be sold as slaves somewhere else in the galaxy. Vexar attempts to fight Mario, but the plumber refuses and tries to talk some sense into the villain. This is where the movie's moral comes in. Life is full of unexpected events. Good or bad, happy or sad, we need to accept whatever comes our way. Mario tells Vexar that while what happened to his sister was bad, the actions Vexar is taking aren't what she would want. This makes Vexar stop and think about everything that he's done, and we find out something else about his brother. Apparently, his brother did care about Vexar and was planning on throwing him a surprise party before he was murdered. Well, that's kinda conflicting with the character that his brother has, and even Vexar admits it. Either way, before they have more time to ponder, the comet starts to shake, and a cannon forms near the battleground. All of the heroes and villains climb the cannon to see a powerful laser forming inside. So, remember that orb Vexar was looking for? It's an orb from the Dark Matter Comet that can shoot out a powerful laser to recreate the world. Vexar was planning to use it after Majora destroyed the world, but also wanted to have the laser on standby as a failsafe. Feeling regretful, Vexar jumps into the cannon to stop the laser, as the only way to stop the cannon is by removing the core. Mario jumps in after him, and then Luigi, and then the other heroes form a chain to pull the three out. Even Spat and Cyclotron X help out. They successfully get out of the cannon, but the laser fires. Thinking quickly, Captain Homer slows down time, as that's something he could always do, and a Smash Ball appears out of nowhere. Mario grabs the Smash Ball, and shares its power with Luigi, Wario, Sonic, Rayman, SpongeBob, and Zim, who all activate their super forms to stop the laser. They create their laser and push back against the Dark Matter Comet, which saves the world and destroys the comet. But not before the heroes all make it off on the ship. The superforms wear off and our heroes land at Great Bay, where Vexar thanks Mario for talking some sense into him. Now that the world is saved, the heroes hold a memorial service for Dudw. Vexar, Spat, and Cyclotron X leave to live their lives with an unknown party as a form of redemption. The group suggests giving themselves a name, to which Mario suggests Media All-Stars. Credits. Also, a clip from the ranting Swede portion of Shaping the Big City plays during the credits for some reason. And there's a post-credit scene of Captain Homer talking to Jack and Vexar about how they'll have more adventures in the future. And that was my first attempt at making a full-length film. What an attempt indeed. The story has potential, but it's bloated, full of scenes or characters that add nothing to the plot, and overall is boring to watch. The moral is good, but it comes in at the end of the movie, which is where it gets needlessly sad and violent. There's a good lineup of characters, but many of them are underutilized, and many of them don't need to be in the movie at all. Captain Homer is a self-insert for me, and while that's not a bad idea on paper, the problem is that he's underdeveloped as a character, and ends up being the one who gets the group out of most situations. There's an army of Dementors closing in on us? Don't worry, I'll make them blow up. Do we need to reason with this monster we wronged before? I'll grab the villain's weapon and use it to reason with him. The world-destroying laser has been activated. I'll slow down time. He's a living ex machina, and it would be fine if he solved all of these problems as the main character, trying to overcome these obstacles on his own. But he's not. He's meant to be a supporting character and act as the group's Nick Fury, and he ends up stealing the spotlight for most of the movie. When a character can just get rid of or minimize conflict in the story with no struggle or growth, you're left with a boring and predictable plot. And after me saying all of this, I'm sure you're wondering why I made this video in the first place. Well, besides celebrating the 10th anniversary of this film, I wanted to say this. When I first made Media All-Stars, I was just getting into making videos, and I largely made them for myself. I had these ideas that I really wanted to see realized, so I got to work on them. But they were usually rushed together and should have been made with more thought or knowledge regarding video creation. That's what made Media All-Stars what it is, a mishmash of random ideas that don't complement each other. When I began making videos for YouTube, I tried to plan out my videos a bit more and get better at editing. I struggled at first, but I got better at making videos over time. And I would say that I'm much happier with the videos I put out today than I am with the ones from back then. Of course, I don't regret how those earlier videos turned out, including stuff I made in private like Media All-Stars, because over time, I started to see where I could get better and made strides to improve. But I don't want to make this part about me. I want to make it about you, the person who is watching this video. If you like to create stuff, you have every right to make the things you want to make. Not everything you make will be perfect, and that's okay. Being creative isn't easy for everyone. Maybe you struggle with motivation, or you're scared to show what you've been working on to someone else. Or perhaps there's something in your project that you want to include that's distracting you from your vision. That's okay. Creativity is a process that works differently for everyone. And when you look back on the things you made before, don't cringe or tell yourself that you shouldn't be making things. Sure, you might have included things that you didn't need to, or tried too hard to appeal to certain people, or made a movie that was over 2 hours long. Yes, that's how long Media All-Stars is. But that's where you started. People rarely begin with their best work, so don't expect the first thing you make to be perfect either. When you move on to the next thing, you'll look at what you did before, and you'll find ways to improve. Don't give up on what it is you want to make. Remember to experiment, start small, and consider the feedback that others give you. If you have an idea for a silly but quick video, or an ambitious project, get to making it. Now, before wrapping up, I did want to mention that Media All-Stars was going to become a whole franchise of mine. I had plans for more movies, spin-offs that focused on each character, a remake of the original movie that would have condensed and removed certain plot points. Like, the death of Dudw and Vexar's sister would have been removed entirely from that version. There was also a TV series, 2 potential sequel series, and of course, the reboot. There's a lot more to the Media All-Stars universe than just this one movie. But I think I've rambled about this silly project enough for one video. If there's enough interest in it, I'll make follow-up videos about the rest of the series, but for now, thanks for watching this odd video about a weird fan film I made, and keep on creating. Have a wonderful day!
I got you when the going gets rough, yo. Nobody's this tough, is this love? You may feel like you can't go on. If we try side by side, we'll survive, never die. Now you feeling my flow, what I mean? No doubt that you feel it like I do. Don't let a chance like this pass by you. I'll combo like you and me is meant to be. Fly across the border. The perfect combo, you and me, can't you see? Come on, let's fly across the border. Perfect combo, you and me, baby. Come on, let's fly across the border. If we try side by side, we'll survive, never die. Fly across the border.